Alrighty, so now that episode 4 has come out for the Rings of Power, I figured I'd talk about episodes 1 through 4, just because there's 8 episodes total for season 2. So we're at the halfway point, which is kind of crazy considering they released episode 1 through 3 at once. I think it would have been better to probably just do episode 1 and 2, because at this rate, it seems like it's like, well, why didn't you just release them all, you know? But besides that, it's been about 2 years since season 1 released, and I enjoyed season 1 pretty much. I think it had the sad reality of trying to set up a lot for future seasons, so it was kind of a rough intro, taking aspects of the books and kind of condensing it to a smaller timeline, which show-wise makes sense, because I've tried to be better about, like, yes, there is the source material, but this is an adaptation / reimagining, like most things are, and to try to look at it from that lens. And so I know a lot of people, had their complaints about Rings of Power as a whole in the season 1, for pretty much the dumbest fucking reasons, but big shout out to YouTube channels like the Broken Sword or the Broken Edge and Nerd of the Rings, where you can really take a deep dive into the books in a more condensed form, which kind of shows you how even Lord of the Rings, the movies, as good as they are, did a lot of things not in the books, changed a lot of things. The Hobbit, especially The Hobbit, changed a lot. And so, I think we can kind of separate, like, okay, it's not entirely the book, it's taking aspects of the books and being its own thing. But so a big benefit watching season 2 is that it's kind of the payoff of everything set up in season 1. And so I watched episode 1, 2, and 3 basically in one go, and then episode 4 came out on Thursday, which I thought it was Fridays last time. But I believe from what I saw, they're trying to do at least 5 seasons, and you can kind of tell how it's alluding from the beginning that the ending will be the monologue from the intro from Fellowship of the Ring, the last alliance of men and elves against Sauron's forces. So, right from the get-go, it's basically, and this is going to be spoilers. Hopefully you've already watched it and you're not watching this for whatever reason without having watched it first. So yeah, season 2 starts with basically the ice fortress where Galadriel and crew had been in the beginning of season 1. You get to see that before it became that, and basically it starts with Dawn of the Second Age, and an elfish person is declaring that they are basically the new Dark Lord, and their name is Sauron, but you go, oh, I don't recognize this, so you go, oh, and it shows Adar, and Adar is played by a different actor this time, but you go, oh, okay, so this is like before the events of, season 1 of Rings of Power. So I would say it's probably like a 15-minute scene where it's Sauron basically telling the orcs, you're going to follow me, you have no choice. And so he kills an orc in front of the other orcs, just to show how intense he is, and is like, okay, now crown me king. So that, the Adar is holding the crown and is like, actually, flips it around and stabs him in the back. And then all the orcs pile on, start shanking him. And it's like, thank God they didn't do like a one guy attacks at once. No, everyone attacks him. And Sauron, for a minute, is fighting back pretty well and then just dies. And so they're like, oh man, we're looking at his dead body. Oh, homie's dead. But then he basically like shines light out of his body and explodes the area with ice and cold and creates like a never-ending storm. So that basically shows you how that became that in Rings of Power. But then it cuts to, they're like, Hail Adar, the guy who kind of saved us from Sauron. But then it cuts to Sauron's body, which basically is just clothes and blood. But the blood seeps down way, way below into the earth. And is forming like what looks like a bunch of worms almost in just a goo pile. And a rat happens to walk by, and it attaches itself to the rat and slowly starts forming. And it's kind of like an abdomen of a body. And it's basically going out of the cave, and you just follow this blob mass wandering around, and then finally just sits still. And a lady driving a wagon happens to drive by. It attaches to the wheel, and she's like, "What the?" And you see it climb in, grab her, eats her, and then out comes Halbrand from season 1. So you're like, oh, okay, this is how we got there. A little thing where it's like, the movies are just as guilty, where the timing is like, where are we at? Because right when he died, it said the dawn of the second age. And I think the Rings of Power show takes place a little after that. And so I was like, is it implying that he was that blob for a while, or the next scenes, were for a while? But yeah, so basically he's just wandering along, and he passes, a group of humans walking by him, and he's like, "Hey, old man." And the old man has, the necklace pouch that Halbrand has, which you figure out is, fake in a sense of Sauron. But he's asking the guy, like, "Oh, you were a servant of kings?" And he's like, "Yeah, if you go that way, the orcs are killing everyone, so you might as well come with us and get on this boat and try to go to the better lands." And he's like, okay. And then it cuts to, they're on the boat. And then he's like, "Hold on to something." They get attacked by, that giant monster. And the guy is like pinned down. He's like, "Help me." And Sauron just grabs the necklace king emblem thing. And then cuts to the raft where he meets Galadriel. So that was pretty cool. A little like, oh, really getting to see his power. One thing that I'm loving about this show is actually being able to see Sauron as a person doing things. It's a shame in the Lord of the Rings movies, even at the end, we didn't get to briefly see like his somewhat physical form coming back to fight Aragorn or anything. But it cuts to Galadriel and Elrond because of the three rings, and him finding out that Halbrand was Sauron, or at least somebody. They go back, and Gil-galad's like, so I heard a little funny thing from Elrond. And Galadriel's like, "You," doing the meanie face. She's like, "You fucker." But basically she tells them that Halbrand is Sauron, and they're like, "You dumbass. How could you be?" She was like, "I was deceived." They're like, "No, you're actually just stupid." But then, Gil-galad's like, on to the other matter, Elrond, show me these rings that you say are dangerous. And he's like, "No, they were corrupted by Sauron." And, Galadriel's like, "No, no, 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 they were made without his interference." And so Gil-galad's like, "If you don't give me those rings, I'm going to arrest you." So Elrond just takes a nice old jump into the ocean and flees back to the Grey Havens, I think. I can't remember where he goes, but he seeks out, the words of the shipmaster Círdan, which, as everyone's pointed out, he's got a beard because homie's that old. He's got a beard. He's like super ancient. But, he's like, "Yes, I'll go throw these in the ocean for you, Elrond." But then, he can't. But basically with episode 1, because I have some notes here, it shows Adar taking over Mordor and basically making either people choose to die or be his servants. And Halbrand shows up and is like, "If you let me go and free my people, I will, find out where Sauron is." Because he's basically like, "I heard a rumor from Galadriel of a sorcerer, ooh." So then Adar's like, "Okay, I'll let you go," which is really weird because at first Adar's like, "You're gonna wish you were dead," and then proceeds to just not. They put a chain over his neck and scare him a little bit, but they still feed him and everything. I'm like, fucking torture his ass if that's what you're gonna do. Like, cut his feet off. I don't know, shit. So I was expecting more out of that. Instead, Adar's just like, "I'll let you go." And you're like, "Oh, okay." It was kind of interesting. You see more of the stranger, the not Gandalf with Nori. They're going to Rune and wandering around. They find their little buddy, Poppy. But they're also being followed by a guy in a cool ass mask. And they're, the stranger's having a dream of a branch, which basically looks like a wizard staff. And they keep blue balling you that it's Gandalf. But here's the thing with that. And after having watched a little bit more, lore videos and refreshing my mind, even before that, because you want to say it's Gandalf, but they introduce a character in this, the Dark Wizard, in Rune, where you go, it looks like Saruman, and it's almost like they're trying to hit you over the head, like, yeah, it's them. But here's the thing. By the time Lord of the Rings happens, Gandalf is completely, shocked by Saruman's betrayal. He never saw that coming. And so Saruman basically was like a good guy from the beginning, slowly being like, I want to find the One Ring. So it would really make no sense for the show to be like they were fucking enemies and then became friends. So the other conclusion you could come to is that this stranger and the Dark Wizard are the two blue wizards that were never mentioned in Lord of the Rings, barely mentioned in The Hobbit. I'm talking about the movies where, Gandalf's like, there are the two blue wizards. I never, what happened to them? But, if you watch some stuff about the blue wizards where it's like they were kind of enemies, then became friends, helped the people of Rune, you're like, okay, I could definitely see them setting that up. So you're like, okay. But again, of the storylines, still, like the stranger, it's curious because, it's a wizard. I just am like, like they almost seem to spend too much time on it where I'm like, at least it's not the whole Harfoot story from the first season where I was like, please, for the love of God, just stop. But you're like, okay. But, in the whole first episode, you don't see Arendir, like Numenorian, nothing. You're like, okay. So episode 2 starts, and, it's focusing more on Durin, the dwarves, and all that, because he's still not speaking to his father. They've basically been banished to be poor people in Khazad-dûm. And so his wife is like, you need to man the fuck up and go apologize to your dad, even if you feel like he's wrong. Like, you can't keep this up, you dumbass. And then Mount Doom, having been activated, quakes the earth and shakes the earth, basically. And so in Khazad-dûm, how they get sunlight inside is that they use these mirrors that go from the outside in and shine sunlight, reflecting off mirrors. And so the earthquake causes it to basically break, and that whole area just gets destroyed. So now, there's no food growing. People are freaking out. They need food. They're going to their emergency reserves. And, Durin's just like, shit. Like, what do I do? And you still don't see him with Elrond yet, sadly. But episode 2 is also, again, where the Dark Wizard is introduced. And he looks just like Saruman. But he basically brings back that bald wizard lady from the first season who turned into the butterflies. And you'll notice a lot, like the Dark Wizard and stuff, they all have this eye icon where it seems like the eye of Sauron. And so it just kind of hints more of like, this is a prequel to Peter Jackson's Lord of the Rings, especially with the Balrog from season 1 looking the same Balrog, and, seeing Narsil, and it looks the same. So I would say, canonically, to the movies, this is a prequel to the Peter Jackson movie, Lord of the Rings. Just like how War of the Rohirrim was probably a direct prequel to Peter Jackson's Lord of the Rings. Like, it's, I need to see more about the official stuff. But, again, they're really trying to make you think this is Gandalf and Saruman, which maybe they can pull off. It just really sounds odd, where you're exploring Rune, which they never really did ever in The Hobbit or the Lord of the Rings movie. And so it would make sense if you do the Blue Wizards, which I don't know how much rights they have, because the whole thing, if I remember correctly, why they're never referenced or shown is that like the media companies didn't have the rights to the Blue Wizards. And so it's just like meh, But yeah, in episode 2, it basically continues also with Gil-galad being like, "You're a moron, Galadriel. Like you just fell for it. Whether you were just down bad for Halbrand, but you just fell for it." And so he's like, "Okay, I don't trust you to go after Sauron alone." And the whole episode, Galadriel's basically like, "Elrond, like, buddy, I'm sorry, he like, come on, you can't be that mad at me." And Elrond's like, "Can you fucking leave me alone?" But then she's like, I'd like for you to come with me. I think it would be beneficial, like you'd serve under me. And then he's like, fuck off. But then towards the end of the episode, Gil-galad is like, "Okay, you will go hunt for Sauron, and Elrond is coming, but guess what? He's the leader because I don't trust you. No, even though we agree on some things, I just don't trust you to actually be able to kill Sauron." So Elrond's like, "All right, I'm the leader." And you can see Galadriel's like, and you're just like, why? Why are you fucking mad, bro? Like, you're mad that everyone like doesn't trust that you can fight Sauron alone, and you keep saying, "I'm gonna fight Sauron alone. Only I can do it." And it's like, get off your fucking high horse and accept help from Elrond. Elrond, who is clearly being the most level-headed person in the room, even more than Gil-galad, even more than Círdan. Elrond is like, "These rings are going to fuck us up. We need to go throw them in the ocean." And they're all like, "No." Because what happens is they wear the rings, and the tree of life or whatever comes back to life, like the light of the even star. They're like, "It's coming back because we put the rings on," which is all a trick, obviously, from Sauron. But then that's when they're like, "Elrond, you dumbass, you're wrong. These rings are going to benefit us." And it slowly starts going into how the more they wear the rings, it like enhances their power of like seeing into the future and stuff like that. So Elrond's like, "I still feel like there's something wrong with this." You're like, okay. By the end of the episode, yes, Halbrand basically waits in Eregion and is like, but it's Sauron, but he's still disguised as Halbrand, and he's like, "I'm not leaving till you let me in." And Celebrimbor's like, "No, actually, go fuck off." But then as he's walking away, he's like, "Oh, if only Galadriel told you that the rings worked." And Celebrimbor's like, "What?" A lot, and that's one criticism I can have for this show, which a lot of shows are guilty of. It has the tropey show feel, where it's like, comically, "I'm walking away, I'm going to say something to bait you," and then, "Hold on, wait," and then they go. And, it's the comical, that scene. And so Celebrimbor's like, "The rings worked? Oh my god. Okay, come on in so we can talk." And then he's talking to Halbrand, and Halbrand's basically like, "I haven't been honest with you. I'm actually not Halbrand. I'm not a king of the Southlands. I am something more." But instead of saying Sauron, he basically says he's an agent of Iluvatar, like one of the angels. And he's like, "I'll show you." And he just comes bursting out of the chimney, summons a bunch of heavenly clouds, and now it has like the, silk robes and the white hair and the elf ears, and he's like, "I'm Anatar, sharer of gifts." And Celebrimbor's like, "Oh my, like, God, like Jesus Christ himself has walked into my room," and is like, so, he basically is convincing him like, "I'm here to show you how to make the great rings of power and who we should make them for." And is literally over the shoulder of Celebrimbor, like, yeah, do this, say this, which is, from the images I've seen from certain appendices, books and stuff, it's like pretty accurate. And I think they did a pretty good job of like how he's able to trick Celebrimbor because of his illusions and magic, basically saying he's an angel And so Celebrimbor's like, I'm gonna write a note to Gil-galad and tell him like I'm closing down my forge, but in secret, we're going to work, on building these rings. And so they're like, in order to build the rings, we need mithril. And so, crazy enough, they're like, we should go talk to the dwarves because their shit is all fucked up. And if they give us mithril, these rings of power to them will help save their cities, basically. So you're like, oh yeah, Sauron's been planning this shit from the beginning. But yeah, big ending to that episode. I think, let's see, with episode 3, because I just wrote notes for each episode. Episode 3, okay, so this is where it starts out focusing on the Númenóreans. And so you're like, wow, we've gone 2 episodes without talking about them. Episode 3 starts with basically all the Númenóreans going back to Númenor. Elendil thinks that Isildur is dead, and so, they just pack their shit up and leave. What you find out is that Isildur is not dead, but was pulled into a spider's cave, which I don't know if they're trying to assume it's a young Shelob, or just one of the, spawns of Ungoliant, like in The Hobbit, how there's the spiders. But he's in the spider's cave, and Elendil had not taken back Isildur's horse because it wouldn't listen to anyone. And so the horse basically found the spider's cave and is trying to save Isildur. Isildur is trapped in the web next to an orc. The orc wakes up because Isildur's trying to grab his knife. They start fighting, but then a spider just jumps on the orc, obliterates his head, eats him, and is trying to attack Isildur. He escapes on the horse, so you're like, hell yeah. And he meets a woman who stabs him in the leg thinking he's an orc. But she's like, I was attacked too. I'm just trying to find my husband. And so they're venturing along. They get attacked by a bunch of Adar's servants. And then Arondir comes in like crazy, like, torpedo flipping and, and doing all the cool moves and kills everyone. He's like, hey, Isildur, I'm all angry now. I do feel like the Arondir actor kind of reminds me of Elon Musk a little bit. It's kind of jarring, but every time he come on screen, I'm like, God, he looks like Elon Musk. But back to the show, you find out between seasons, Bronwyn died of a poisoned arrow, almost like what happened to Keely in The Hobbit, and he's just like, Mordor arrows are not so forgiving, blah blah blah. So she's just dead. And I looked it up. The actress basically wanted to quit acting to focus on like a women's right protesting or something for Iran, I think. I can't remember the full thing, but good on her for quit acting to focus more on like her like activities. The actor for Adar is different because it's Uncle Benjen from Game of Thrones. He was like, oh, I've done my part. I think, I want someone else to do it. I think he was just like, I'm scared of the hate. I'm quitting. But the actor they picked to play Adar this season, great. But yeah, so Bronwyn's dead. Theo is mad at Arondir and is like, you know what's crazy? You're actually not my dad, so fuck you. And so they have a little bit of drama. You find out that the woman that's with Isildur is actually one of the servants of Adar, and she's trying to burn off the mark. And so you're like, uh-oh, what's happening here? When they cut back to Númenor, basically the queen, they're like voting again. She's going to become queen again. But, with Númenor, since they're racist against elves, ironically, you find out Alpharazon, like his sister or something, cousin, the young lady, had stolen the queen's palantir, and it's like, I'm gonna use this to fuck her over. And so basically everyone's like blaming her for the deaths of the people who volunteered to go with her to help the people of Mordor fight back. And so a lot of people are pissed off that their brothers, sons, husbands, whatever is dead. And so Alpharazon's talking to the queen, I think Muriel, and is like, you should wear red because it shows a sign of like strongness and going for the future, not looking back. And she's like, no, I'm going to wear white because that's what my father, I think, or husband wore. And they're like, oh, there's an omen that if an eagle shows up, you're blessed, whatever. And so they're at the coronation thing, and the girl walks in with the palantir, and it's like, she's using an elvish relic. What the? And so all the racist people are like, yo, what the fuck? And she's like, well, we need that, we need to be able to see the future. And they're like, no, like very racial tensions. And they're like trying to kill her. And the crowd goes crazy. And Elendil tries to grab the palantir, but it shocks him back. And then Eagle shows up. And at first I'm like, please let them talk for once. Jesus, because they can talk. If you didn't know that. They can speak. So I'm like, speak, please, speak. But, Alfarazon basically takes it as a sign that he's supposed to be king because he's walking up to it. And the Eagle's like, huh? Chirp, 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 huh? And flies off. So they're like, Alfarazon is the king. But, it's like misinterpreting the sign. So I'm sure that's not going to be good. But you're like, bro, the eagle can speak. Say something. Be like, I'm not here for that motherfucker. I'm here for the queen. No, instead he's like, chirp, chirp. Boo, flies off. I'm like, okay, great. Oh yeah, it quickly, when it shows Adar, it shows that the orc society has like cultural stuff, as in they have a family. The orc that's always like Adar's right hand man, he's got a wife and a baby, which I was like, okay, that's cool to see, because in the Lord of the Rings and the Hobbit, you just see him as like mindless murderers created for death, really, and killing. But then you see they have kind of inner turmoil and like their own thoughts and stuff. So you go like, well, what is their society like? And that's what I liked about Rings of Power Season 1, where you're like, oh, I get to see more of their society. This is pretty cool. And from what I've seen and looked up to, because people were complaining about this, like, wah, ooh, my orcs, my orcs in Lord of the Rings shouldn't have families. But then when you look, it's like, it was written in the book, that they reproduce just like elves and men. So you're like, okay. So the show just interpreted that in their own way. You're like, okay. Is it so hard to believe that they would probably, since they were old elves and stuff, that they would procreate the same way? I didn't think anything of it. If anything, I was like, hey, it's world building, brings more to the story. Cool, show me more. I don't want more of the same. Show me something new. So that was pretty cool. Yeah, Sauron basically tricking Celebrimbor asked Durin to come to Eregion to talk about their trade of Mithril for the Rings of Power, but Durin does not trust it, so he brings it back to his dad, and his dad is like, thank you for your apology, I think these rings will be good, and so they give him the Mithril and forge the Rings of Power for the dwarves, and Durin's like, oof, because he doesn't trust Sauron either, because Sauron's like, Elrond spoke highly of you, and he's like, you're a fucking liar. Elrond's my friend, but he would never say weird, like, nice shit like that. So, he's already kind of calling out Sauron's bullshit. And then episode 4, which came out a couple days ago, was really nice because they show so much in this episode, where to me it's a lot of world building and of other things we just never got to see in the movies. So the first thing is the stranger meets Tom Bombadil. Basically, imagine if God, of our real world, like religious aspects, how they view God, was basically on Earth, but just took the form of like a farmer, and you just never knew it. But everyone's like, there's just something cool about that farmer down the street who's always really nice and seems to just like have stories to tell. And you're like, weird, That's basically Tom Bombadil. I think looks wise and character wise, they did him awesome. You know, he's in the Lord of the Rings books, but they don't show him in the movie. He's in Rune because he's like, oh, you know, this used to be a green land. I'm trying to figure out there's something weird going on here. And the stranger is like, you know so much. And Tom, because he's basically God, speaks in the third person where he's like, Tom's been here a long time, before the trees, before the sun, like, you know, before everything. Tom was here. And is basically talking to the stranger like, you know, you have the ability to learn this magic, but you're not ready just yet. And, you know, to have your staff, like, you're not ready, but you can be on the path to be ready. Because there's also an Ent that lives there with Tom. And, you know, the stranger's like, that's the branch, and tries to rip the branch off, and the tree basically eats the stranger. And then Tom says, you know, word for word what Treebeard says to the other trees, which is like, you know, you should be asleep, you shouldn't be awake, eat earth, drink water, blah, blah, blah. And so you're like, oh, okay. But yeah, just a really cool scene between Tom Bombadil and the stranger. And I feel like, you know, hopefully the stranger is one of the blue wizards and we get more of that, and it's not necessarily Gandalf, even though the stranger says a lot of shit that Gandalf says. So I don't know if it's just huge teasing or what, but yes, it was fantastic to see Tom Bombadil. And yeah, so Galadriel and Elrond and their little team is basically going to Eregion to warn Celebrimbor because the messages they sent never got answered. And so, you know, they have a little discussion argument because Galadriel's like, oh, like, it's not the ring talking, it's me, like, meh, meh, meh. And Elrond's like, listen, whoa, you're stepping out of line. Like, hey, like, I'm the leader, shut up and follow my lead. And, you know, Galadriel's like, from what I've seen from my visions, like, you know, if something happens, you know, like, you'll have to put me down. And he's like, how about you, like, you're literally letting the ring corrupt you and tell you these things. Stop saying this bullshit. But they go to an area where they find out that where the messenger's dead bodies are, and they are in the Barrow Downs, which I remember from War in the North, and I believe one of the Lord of the Rings like movie tie-in games, because you fight the Barrow Wights, and I think they did them pretty damn scary and cool in Rings of Power. The Barrow Wights are basically like the Ring Wraiths. I mean, like physical spirits that are virtually unkillable, except the Barrow Wights have chains and stuff and just horrifically mutilate and explode bodies. So that was pretty cool to see them fight. And they can't really kill them. You know, they say that there was like a rule, like they can only be killed by the weapons that either put them down in the first place or that they were buried with. But they can't find them. So one of their homies gets killed, but they're able to run away. So very good fight scene. Cool to see the Barrow Wights. Again, just like all the other stuff introduced in this episode, like Tom Bombadil, that's not it. We get to see more. Arondir and Isildur, find out the woman they've been with is a servant of Adar, and they're confronting her, immediately cage her up, but then it opens that nice conversation where she's like, I didn't have a choice. Like, you want to automatically say I'm evil because you see this, but I didn't have a choice. It was either do this or be murdered, and I didn't want to die. And so, you know, it brings up a fair point where a lot of the people, of course, they're going to become servants of Adar because the only other choice is to be killed, and they don't want to die. And so you're like, okay. And basically they're put into a situation where Arondir and Isildur get trapped in a swamp and almost basically eaten by a monster, but she puts a stick to save them. They kill the monster, and then they kind of realize that, you know, maybe she's not bad, but they undo her cuffs. Isildur's about to kiss her, and then she pulls a sword, and it's like, none of your people will ever welcome me, knowing that I was, you know, part of like the servant of Adar Wildman group. And Arondir was already ready because he's in the bag with an arrow. He's like, I'm gonna kill you. And so they're like, hey, hey, hey. But then they look up and there's something big, and it just kadoom, hits the girl, and she hits a rock, and I'm shocked she's not dead. But you find out it's two Ents. The Ents have basically gotten pissed off that the orcs have been killing trees, and so they don't view humans any different. But then Arendir, speaking, Sindarin or Quenya, is like trying to convince them, like, we're not evil like them. But then the Ents are like, have you cut down trees for your benefit? And he's like, shit, yes, I have. But, like, we're not trying to be evil about it. And, Arendir's just speaking back and forth with the Ents, because you see an Ent wife for once, basically saying how, like, the orcs are ruthless, killing everything, everyone. And, he's able to kind of talk down the Ent wife and the Ent, but, it brings up a good conversation where they're like, you're basically just as bad. You're killing the trees to create boats and stuff. And they talk about how a lot of, like, the children that the Ent wives had taken care of over, thousands of years, she could hear all their screams and stuff when the orcs killed them. And you're like, damn, it's a whole nother part of the society. We got to see kind of in not Return of the King. I mean, kind of, but with the Two Towers. But it's so interesting to see more of it. And so, they're talking about forgiveness. And you see it in the trailer where the Ent wife basically says that forgiveness takes an age. Like in the lives of Ents who basically live, thousands of years, like outpassing elves. For them, forgiveness takes forever, an eternity almost, because they live for so long. So I really liked seeing that aspect. This episode really hammered down, like, so much of what's in the world. The Barrow-wights, Tom Bombadil, the weird swamp centipede thing, the Ent wives. You get to see so much. I loved it. It was a great episode. Didn't really focus on the main story, which kind of sucks when there's only 8 episodes, but I just love the world building. So by the end, it basically, Theo gets saved by Arendir and is like, I'm sorry for the way I acted, and they're more cool. I think they make him the Lord of Peregrine or whatever the town is, unless I misheard. But the end is basically all the orcs are marching to attack, I believe. Oh my god, I can't remember the Eregion, Jesus. And they basically get spotted, Galadriel, Elrond's group. And so Galadriel gives the ring to Elrond and is like, get out of here, I'll distract them. And then the other elves in the group are like, wow, she's so brave to sacrifice herself for us. And Elrond is like, she ain't doing it for us, she's doing it to protect the ring. That's all she cares about. And I feel like both can be right. Because clearly she still does care about Elrond, but she is being corrupted by the elven ring of power, where she cares about its survival. So you are like, interesting. But she gets captured. After fighting pretty hardcore, she gets captured, and she sees Adar, and you're like, uh-oh. So, for the most part, episode 1 through 4, I think it's doing a good first half overall, but I do feel like, here's I guess, my biggest complaint with season 2 so far, is I think they're trying to do too many stories and not enough time for the stories that matter most. Like, they spend a lot of time with the stranger in the first couple episodes, where a lot of it I felt like could be outright skipped to get to the damn point. And it doesn't even show you Isildur or Erendir till episode 3. And so some of the stories I'm like, either should have been just fully cut down or combined into another story. I like that kind of the Númenórean and Erendir storylines have fused now. But even like Númenor, you see that for like one episode and then you don't see it anywhere else. And so I think they are kind of trying to juggle too many things at once. And who knows, maybe in the next 4 episodes, it'll all conclude well. But I'm kind of getting annoyed with the stranger storyline, with the constant blue balling. of, "Oh, is he Gandalf? Is that Saruman?" Like, just fucking, because they do a whole scene where it's like, "We should pick you a name." I'm like, you know, you're John Gandalf. I'm just the like we're wasting so much time with the, is he Gandalf? Is he not? Like, it's starting to actually just annoy me. I wish they get to the point. I hope they do something by the end with the Dark Wizard and the Stranger. Hoping to see more of Tom Bombadil. It was cool to see more of the creatures. They're condensing the story of the book pretty closely, so I'm curious if we'll see Eregion get destroyed by the end of this season, or if they're setting up for it and Celebrimbor will be killed by the end of this season. I assume next season will focus, like the end of this season, I can predict that Eregion gets destroyed, Sauron goes to, or Anatar goes to Numenor, and season 3 will be the fall of Numenor. And then I don't know what season 4 is, but season 5, if they're doing the 5-season structure, will be basically leading up to the last alliance of men and elves, which is the beginning of the Fellowship in that prologue. What is crazy, though, is if there's a 2-year gap between seasons, it's going to be a long-ass time before we get to season 5, because it's basically going to be like 10 years to get to season 5, which is insane if that's the case. I really hope I don't have to wait that long. I'm liking the pacing of this season a lot more than this first season, but yeah, I just wish we could maybe focus on like 3 of those stories. Either that, or instead of doing 8 episodes, make it 12 episodes, 10 episodes. Just give me a little bit more, just so it doesn't feel like you're not really focusing on this. But I'm looking forward to the last 4 episodes. Once all 4, come out, 5, 6, 7, 8, I'll review those in a single thing. So that'll be good. But that's going to be it for my Rings of Power Season 2, Episode 1 through 4 review. If you agree with me, disagree with me, as always, tell it in the comments. If you think it's woke trash, sure, whatever, say it. You want to dislike this video because I like the show, do whatever. Like it, let's discuss. But, of course, if you disagree, please actually have, good points on why you disagree. That would be awesome, because it's never a harm for people to have a conversation. And, again, in the end, it's all fucking fake. It's a fictional world with fictional characters. It ain't going to hurt you in the real life. So until next time, that's going to be it. I'm out. Thank you for watching.